55th Annual ISNA Convention. In God we trust.
So we will be beginning our talk show program for the night. I'm very excited to be introducing three of our amazing scholars that we have, and we'll be diving deep into the theme of Generation Thrive that I described earlier. So before we begin with the questions for our esteemed scholars, I'd like to do a couple quick introductions of each one. So Imam Zaid Shakir to my right. He's a co-founder, serves on the board of trustees, and senior faculty member of Zaytuna College located in Berkeley, California. He's amongst the most respected and influential Islamic scholars in the West. As an American Muslim who came of age during the civil rights struggles, he has brought both sensitivity about race and poverty issues and scholarly discipline to his faith-based work. He's a member of the Board of Trustees at Zaytuna College, as I mentioned, and he speaks and writes on a wide range of topics, and he's regularly included among the Western world's most influential Muslims in the Muslims 500. Sheikh Yasser Qadi, to my left, is a lecturer and Islamic orator who has authored several books about Islam. He's a popular speaker in many Muslim circles in the US, Canada, England, and Australia. He was born in Houston, Texas, and went to high school in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Chemical Engineering from the University of Houston. He pursued an education in Islamic Studies and left for the Islamic University of Medina in Saudi Arabia. There, he completed a second bachelor's degree specializing in Hadith studies, and then went on to complete a master's in Islamic theology. After the horrific events of 9/11, he decided to return to America and completed a PhD in Islamic studies from Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. He's currently the Associate Professor of Religious Studies at Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee, the Dean of Academic Affairs at Al-Maghrib Institute, and the Resident Scholar of the Memphis Islamic Center. And to Sheikh Yasser's left is Ustad Abdurrahman Murphy. He's an instructor at Qalam Institute and the director of Roots, Dallas-Fort Worth. Born and raised in Chicago, Ustad Abdurrahman has a bachelor's degree in education and a master's in mental health counseling. He's pursued traditional Islamic studies at the Alamiya level over the last decade with numerous teachers, primarily under the mentorship of Sheikh Abdul Nasser Jangda. He's been serving the community in a full-time capacity in various roles, such as youth director, Islamic studies teacher, chaplain, and imam. So with that, we will begin. Actually, let's get a big round of applause for our speakers that are up here first before we begin. MashaAllah. All right, so first question to start us off. What aspects of our Muslim American legacy do you think are particularly important for our generation and our community as a whole to be aware of?
Any of us?
Anyone, yeah, feel free to.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidil Mursaleen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I think it's very important for us to remember the legacy of the past. And in that regard, I would encourage all of us to not only study, but relate to in terms of our spiritual ancestors in this land. Primarily, but not exclusively, the African Muslims who were brought over here in large numbers. Some say as much as 20% of the enslaved Africans brought to these shores were Muslims. They've left a rich legacy that this isn't the time and place to explore that. But in connecting to that history which precedes this country, there's no way for anyone to say that Muslims are not a legitimate part of this country. When our existence preceded the existence of the country, our Muslim ancestors were instrumental in contributing to the building of this country with their free blood, sweat, and tears, their free labor, the blood, sweat, and tears. So in embracing that history, we embrace indigenous roots, no matter where we might come from, whether we have African ancestry or not. We say that the Khadija radiallahu anha, Salama radiallahu anha, Habiba, Aisha radiallahu anhun, and the other wives of the prophets are our mothers. Very few of us have any genealogical connection to them. We say Ibrahim, millata abikum. Ibrahim is our spiritual father. The Quran tells us he's our spiritual father. Very few of us have any genealogical connection to Ibrahim alayhi salam, but those are our mothers. That's our father, and those are our grandfathers and grandmothers in these lands. And I said not exclusively African. There were many, the Syrians, the Lebanese, the Albanians. The first masjids in New England were built by Albanians, 1913 in Lewiston, Maine, 1916 in Waterbury, Connecticut. Those are all our ancestors, and so we have to see their struggle as our struggle rather as a continuation of their struggles. And so we owe it to them to claim their legacy, to live their legacy, and to feel not that this is something we understand intellectually, but this is something we embrace to the very depths of our being.
So, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam Rasulullah. I think one of the legacies that we of this generation need to think about is the legacy we ourselves are going to leave, the legacy that our children are going to inherit. I believe, and I'm not trying to make this to be more grander than it actually is, I do believe this generation is going to play an instrumental role in solidifying the vision and future of Islam in North America. And the reason for this is that, of course, as Imam Zayd said, there's no question Islam's been here for 300-400 years. There's no question about it. However, it is in this generation in particular where Islam has reached an unprecedented level, both in quality and quantity. You know, the generation of immigrants was the generation of our forefathers. They came 60s, 70s, 80s. That's when the Muslims became in the many millions. We have now, I don't know, between 7 to 12 million. Allah knows exactly how many. But for the first time, those that are born and raised here have come of age. And they're now very comfortable in the identity of their parents who were immigrants, and very comfortable in the identity of the land that they were born in. They're equally at home in East and West. How we practice Islam, our vision of melding our American identity with not only our cultural roots, but also our religious identity is going to impact tremendously. It's like a domino effect. How we begin and how we set up our masajid, how we set up our vision is going to trickle down for many, many generations to come. So we need to think long and hard, especially at this generation, about how we are going to not necessarily reconcile, but merge. What is our vision of being a Muslim in America? What does it mean to have connections with the global world around us? Because in the end of the day, we are one ummah, and also have a connection with the nation state that we're born into. How do we reconcile where there's a clash taking place? How about theological, methodological, legal issues that not only are we inheriting from the Middle East and from our ancient tradition, but also issues of modernity? Our discussions currently taking place, I believe, are going to impact the future of North American Islam. And just to give you one simple example, you know, if you look at, for example, the American Jewish community, a lot of the controversies that they're facing now, they actually emanate from when they first really came of age back in the 1860s, 1870s. You know, the controversies they had about how to practice Judaism back in the 1860s and 70s, it actually resulted in the formation of multiple groups that we're familiar with, the Orthodox, the Conservative, the Reform. These are not groups that were formed, you know, overseas. They were formed by and large in America when American Jews were debating amongst themselves how best to practice Judaism. And their differences trickle down, and to this day, essentially, the stereotypes created 130 years ago are still impacting the modern Jewish American community. We, as the American Muslim level, we are having that conversation that they had 130 years ago. So we need to be very, very perceptive. We need to be brave and bold. We need to be firm where the Sharia requires us to be firm, and open-minded where the Sharia requires us to be open-minded. Bottom line is, I believe we have a very important role to play in this particular generation, and I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to live up to that challenge and pass on a positive legacy to those after us. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. I just want to take a minute first and express gratitude to Imam Zaid and Sheikh Yasser. I'm younger than both of you, and I speak for everybody here in my age bracket and underneath that when I say that we are simply, we're inheriting, mashallah, from the work that y'all did. And so we really appreciate and we ask that Allah reward both of you immensely. Growing up in Chicago, we were used to snow. And I remember on the best days are the days where someone else would shovel your driveway. And I feel like y'all, mashallah, shoveled all of our driveways. So we're able to live our lives now because of the work that you both did and are continuing to do.
Please don't put me in the category of Imam Zaid. I am 20 years younger.
Yeah, he's not that old yet. Shake Yasser a break.
I knew that he'd say something.
He's aspirationally old.
MashaAllah.
I'm straight up old.
Nah. Allah accept. And I mean that. I do think that speaking as somebody who has gone through this sort of generation very recently and is now somewhat of a part of it, but kind of also getting to the other side. I get excited when groceries go on sale. Like, I think that means you're getting old. I think one of the things that we have to keep in focus, and we cannot let it slip away, is the inheritance of this incredible spiritual pedigree that the Prophet ﷺ has given us. You know, everybody can do good work, but very few people can maintain good work while maintaining goodness with Allah. And that's something that the Prophet ﷺ, in his being sent to us, is part and parcel of the gift that Allah has given us. You know, when the Prophet ﷺ arrived to Medina, I'll never forget, not that I was there, but I'll never forget when I learned the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, when he was speaking to the people, almost like the mission statement of the new city, the new era, you know, he said to everybody, Afsh salam, wa ta'im al-ta'am, wasilu al-arham, wa sallu bil-layli wa nasu niyam. He mentions 4 qualities that are going to need to happen in order for this community to succeed. The first, he says, is that you have to be people who spread peace. And some of the scholars comment and they say this can mean literally, you know, saying salam to one another, or it could mean that you actually, wherever you are somebody that just, your pure presence emanates peace around you. That people feel safe. People feel this sense of tranquility when you walk into the room. They know that they don't have to pick up their wallet or their phone. They know that they don't have to be careful what they say because, you know, it's going to get out of the room. You just inspire that sense of peace. The second thing he says is you need to feed people. Feed food to everybody. Take care of people's nourishment. Take care of their basic needs. The third that the Prophet ﷺ said was make sure that you keep your family ties. We are a community that is built upon the spiritual obligation of making sure that our families are taken care of. But the last thing that he mentions, and this is very powerful, is he says, وَصَلُّوا بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّاسُ نِيَامٌ. Make sure that you pray in the night while everyone else is asleep. And I always wondered, the first 3 items are very public. But the last one, the Prophet ﷺ specifies that it needs to be done, and he actually even further specifies, not just in the night, but he clarifies and says, while others are asleep. And our teacher has taught us that this is a sign of a person's sincerity. This is a sign of a person's closeness with Allah, that everyone can do the first 3, but only a very few select special people can do the last one. And as a result of, if you can complete these 4 actions, the hadith finishes, تَدْخُلُ الْجَنَّةَ بِالسَّلَامِ, that you will be entered in paradise with peace. This is something that I think when it comes to thriving, this verb that is the focus of this conference and MSA National Conference this weekend, we have to remember that we cannot leave God out of the equation. Our success is solely dependent upon our proximity to Allah. And everything else is incredible, but it has to be anchored by our relationship with God and His Messenger. And this generation is going to come, there's going to be a fork on the road for each and every person, especially in college, where you have to decide if this relationship that you've inherited, if you were born Muslim, or this relationship that you've taken on if you converted to Islam, is actually yours sincerely, or it is something that you are doing for the sake of family or community. And the way you prove that to yourself is وَصَلُّوا بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّاسُ نِيَامٌ. You pray in the night while people are sleeping. We ask Allah to give us sincerity.
So I think the next question has been touched upon a little bit in what we've had in the discussion for the first part. But building off of that, what do you think that our ancestors' vision was for us today? And that could be for the Muslim community, American, global, religious. Do you think that we've lived up to that vision? And is there value in revisiting those early visions of aspirations and projects that they had for us? What is it that they would think that today's generation would be doing?
Oh, we'll break it up. Okay.
You're like a dance. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out what the question was. So, I mean, when it comes to where we are and where our ancestors hope that we should be or could be and what they would say, I think without a doubt, you know, when you look at things from a historical perspective, like Sheikh Yasser mentioned, I mean, these are unprecedented times of growth, of community scaling, of access to different things that we've had. I mean, you know, just even from an educational perspective, when were you able to study the religion with such ease? When were you able to gain access to knowledge and you know, foundationally build your faith and your heart with such, subhanAllah, with such access? I mean, 24 hours a day, you could literally be watching, listening, reading. These are things that are just unprecedented in our history. I mean, there were literally times where people would have to travel hours upon hours just to sit for 1 hour or 30 minutes with their teachers. This is something that Sheikh Yasser, Imam Zaid, when they did their studies overseas, this is something that's not uncommon to them. And so we have a lot of privilege in that regard, but with great privilege comes great responsibility. And I think that if I were to think back about what our ancestors who came to this country would tell us, is don't mess it up. You have a lot of things going for you. But the scary thing about when you have a lot of things going for you is that you tend to become complacent. You tend to settle sometimes for mediocrity. You don't realize, subhanAllah, you don't realize the blessings that you have. Allah says, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا, that you won't even be able to fully appreciate one blessing. And so being given this sort of macro wealth, whether it's talking about material wealth or even just opportunity, is a beautiful gift from Allah, but it's also a great challenge. And I think we have to seize the opportunity and make sure that we, within our own capacity, whatever you can do, are using it to the best of your ability and not becoming distracted by things that ultimately are not going to bring benefit. So I think it's using the privileges that we've had.
To follow up on that, I think that Sheikh Abdul Rahman mentioned sort of a dichotomy, things that they would be very, very happy with seeing, to see that one of their spiritual descendants was first place in an international Quran competition, that many masajid, including ours in Oakland, California, there are 5 huffaz, they're all young people from the local community. Each one of them is doing 4 rakats, and even 20 years ago, you're scrambling to find one hafiz from overseas that you can bring to your community. So along those lines, there's been tremendous growth and a lot that they would really, I think, be happy about. But on the other hand, I think their concerns would be the same as the parents of your parents' concerns. Is my child going to remain in Islam? I think there will be things they would absolutely be shocked by and wouldn't recognize. If they went to the average Ramadan during iftar in the average masjid and saw garbage bags of food being thrown into the dumpster, when many of them could barely eat. They were fasting Ramadan on a starvation diet, which the slaves were doing because their diets were designed to starve them to death. The average working life of a slave was 5 years. If they saw people struggling to maintain some sort of Islamic identity, saw people today just doing anything to disassociate outwardly from Islam, if they saw some of the ways that Muslims quickly jump on bandwagons that they wouldn't even recognize. I think a lot of those things would really cause a lot of alarm. And sensing that and understanding how this religion has progressed generationally, certainly it has the flexibility to adapt rather to various environments, and that's why Islam has been the most mobile idea, like Noah Friedman talks about, and what's the fall and rise of the Islamic State. There are two mobile ideas, Islam and democracy. I would argue democracy is not that mobile. How many truly democratic societies have we had historically? You know, you had a semblance of democracy in Greece, ancient Greece, but if you look historically, this is an argument Chris Hedges makes, there hasn't been that many, and someone like Chris Hedges would say this one is already dead. Or as his latest book says, it's the farewell tour of American democracy. So, but Islam, on the other hand, has really been a mobile idea. And we have Asian Muslims, African Muslims, European Muslims, South Asian Muslims, Chinese Muslims, Filipino Muslims as indigenous Muslim communities. And that mobility, on the one hand, has been qualified by a tremendous amount of stability. And that stability has been facilitated by the SNE, the Isnad min ad-Din. فَلَوْلَا الْإِسْنَادِ لَقَالَ مَنْ شَاءَ مَا شَاءَ. Authenticated chains of transmission are an integral part of the religion. Were not for those chains of transmission, anyone could have said anything and attributed it to Islam. So I think a lot of things they would see are breaks in that chain. And I think that will cause them great alarm. And I think it's our responsibility, this generation's responsibility, in addition to continue the wonderful things that are happening, the very creative things that are happening, make sure that you preserve those chains so that those people who preceded us, whether it's 2 generations ago, or 4 or 5 generations, or 20 generations, when they looked at our community, they would recognize it as a Muslim community as they knew Islam. And they will have the foresight and the understanding to know there are going to be certain variations. But the core of the religion is what they would recognize as Islam.
So I don't want to add anything more because, mashallah, both of them have done a very, very comprehensive response. I just want to give a word of advice to all of you in the audience here, and a suggestion and a plan. And that is that when you go back to your communities, when you go back to your masajid, please speak with the elders. Speak with the pioneers that are still alive. Hear their stories. You know, we're talking about their visions. Alhamdulillah, in every community, by and large, some of those pioneers are still around. So I think one of the gems that we don't really take advantage of is those people who founded the masajid, those people who did what they did, and to hear from them their own struggles so that we can contextualize the blessings that we have. I mean, those of you that were here yesterday, you saw, alhamdulillah, my father, got the award for the community service. Speaking with my father over the years has really opened my eyes. Coming to this land in 1963, as one of the first Muslims, immigrant Muslims obviously, and the struggles that he faced here. Can you believe they didn't know when Eid was until a week after Eid? And they would then gather the people and celebrate Eid a week after. Forget our Eid wars, it was just, like they'd find out it was Eid and they come together. And when you read history books about Muslims in the 50s and 60s, in fact, there were communities that would do Jumu'ah on Sunday, because they would all be working. This is the first immigrant batches that came here in the 50s and whatnot. They didn't have time. These were manual laborers. We're not talking about the slave class. I don't know about them. But in terms of the manual laborers that came here, these were struggling people. I'm not going to talk about the fiqh of whether it's jaiz to do Jumu'ah on Sunday. They didn't have imams and scholars. They had no alternative. They would come together on Sunday because that was the church day, and they would give a khutbah and pray. Right? SubhanAllah, just to hear those types of stories, my father tells me this, and alhamdulillah, he's still alive, you can ask him. The first Eid in 1963 here, the first Eid took place the first Sunday after they found out it was Eid back in Pakistan. So he called together a bunch of friends, and they said, we're going to meet at the University of Houston, UC, University Center at the University of Houston, and 3 people showed up for the first Eid of Houston, Texas. And there is no imam, there is no sheikh. They look around themselves and they tell my dad, okay, you lead the salah. He's never led salah in his life, right? Now he's told to lead the Eid salah. And subhanAllah, he could never have imagined that in his own generation, in Houston, Texas, over 35,000 people would be praying Eid salah in his own generation. So,
Takbir.
the vision that they had for the future, I mean, let's not romanticize it. They had no idea what it would happen. And as Imam Zayd said, they would be positively shocked, and they would also be negatively shocked as well. They would see things that they wouldn't recognize as being within Islam, and they would see things in their wildest dreams they could never have imagined. So while they're still amongst us, I encourage all of you, speak to your elders, speak to the pioneers of your own communities, and videotape them, especially those that founded the masajid. Do video interviews, ask them their problems, their struggles, so that you can document and preserve their heritage and their legacy for future generations.
Yeah. And talking about legacy, may I? You're the moderator.
Go for it.
Yeah, you just changed the whole dance
We
now.
changed it, yeah. So I think there's a very important idea by a biologist, but world-class biologist. So when I say it, it might evoke ideas of sort of a Neoplatonic philosopher. But Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, he's written a few books. Probably the most popular is The Science Delusion. It's kind of a response to Dawkins. And anyway, he has this idea of what he calls a morphic resonance. And so the idea is that our genetic code, our genome, it is scientifically proven. There's no way it can determine our parts, but it has nothing to assemble those parts into a recognizable whole. And so his theory, this theory of morphic resonance, is that we inherit our humanness just as giraffes inherit their giraffeness. So this is sort of a Platonic, philosophically Platonic essentialist universal argument that there are universals. Anyway, but it's totally unconnected from all that. This is a scientific theory from our past, from our ancestors. And so that they resonate the energy of humanness. And we inherit that. We inherit that. Our genes are receptors that receive that, and it's that resonance that makes us recognizably human, and not anything that's biologically inherent to our makeup. And the point is, our Muslimness is, I believe, part of what's projected across space and time from our Muslim ancestors. And we inherit that. And if there's a point where our orientation becomes so incongruous with what collectively they're projecting forward, we won't be able to receive it. And at that point, who knows what's going to happen? So I think it's very important for us, from this perspective. And you can examine it. You could reject what I'm saying. This is building on his theory. I'm not going to be offended, but I would suggest that there's some validity to that. I'm trying to develop a more refined version of it from an Islamic perspective. And so I would encourage us to take very, very serious the connection we have with our past, and that we don't become so distinctly innovative that we no longer have the ability to receive that resonance. You know what I mean?
Imam Zayd, one of the examples of this that's very tangible is I remember my home phone number from when I was a child, but I don't know even my brother or sister's cell phone number now. I think with innovation, it tends to always be framed positively, but you never realize what you've lost until you realize it.
And that loss, I talk about this a lot. That loss dehumanizes us.
Yeah.
Because part of what it means to be human is to memorize.
Yeah.
And as our devices take our memory away from us, it's taking away a part of our humanity.
Absolutely.
And as these things are programmed to take more and more away from us what has made us distinctly human, ultimately to think for us. And when that happens, if someone takes this away, then we're finished. I would recommend E.M. Forrester's The Machine Stops. It's a short story. You could read it in 2 hours. It was written in 1909. 1909, he forecast driverless cars. He forecast the internet. He forecast all of these things that are dominating our lives. And humans surrendered their mobility. They surrendered their brains. They surrendered everything to their devices. And the devices were all controlled by a central computer. And then the computer crashed and people couldn't do anything and the human race died out. Now you don't have to read the book. But you should read the book for the details.
I think with that understanding of, how we have to learn from our past and the visions that they had, I think sometimes what can happen is a romanticization of the past as well, that everything that, they did, like, yes, there's a struggle that our generations previously had, and we wouldn't be where we are without many of those challenges that they overcame. But what are some mistakes you can say, or challenges is another way to say it, but I want to delve a little bit on some mistakes that you think we can learn from so that we don't repeat history, or it can inform our vision as well, because it can be daunting to think that, okay, well, our generations in the past, like, we're, standing on the shoulders of giants, but how do we become that for future generations?
So I think mistakes, like you point out, is somewhat of a harsh word, but sometimes, yes, mistakes did occur. And you know what? It's human to err, and I have no doubt that the next generation will look back at ours and pinpoint certain things that we did wrong, we could have done better. That's just natural progress. So if and as we point out these mistakes or shortcomings, this is not in any way meant to disparage them. It's not meant to denigrate from them. Allah knows best, we couldn't have done as much as they did. Nonetheless, you're asking what we can learn from. I think the first thing that comes to my mind is that one of the issues that I feel that our previous generation didn't tackle the way they should have was that they did not make Islam as multicultural and multi-ethnic as it should be. They were accustomed to one Islam of one culture. And for the longest time, not only was there an immigrant African-American divide, but even within immigrant Islam, there was the Arab masjid or the Egyptian masjid with the Pakistani masjid or whatnot. So there was that demarcation that was cultural. And really, it took the horrific events of 9/11 really to build somewhat, solid bridges for the first time between the African American community and the children of the immigrant community. If you grew up, as I did, in the 80s and 90s, by and large, there was very little with those two movements. Yes, we'd come together once in a while in a convention, but by and large, there was very little between these two strands of cultural Islam. And I think that was a shortcoming that we need to proactively think about and make sure that it doesn't happen again.
One of the things that you'll notice, especially, Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh. One of the things that you'll notice, especially with a lot of Muslims who come from immigrant backgrounds, our elders, is that there was almost like a born-again type phase that a lot of them went through later on in their life after their education. And oftentimes it was catalyzed by arriving in a land where they became the extreme minority in terms of their faith. And so, for example, you might see people who, all of us look at pictures maybe of our parents or grandparents. And for those, my dad is a white convert to Islam, but my mother's Egyptian. So when I see pictures of like my mother and her mother and all that family, and I'm like shocked, they look French, right? Because there was this heavy French influence on the culture of Egypt to the point where even my grandmother's name, even though it was Safiya, right, it was Sophia. There was this heavy influence. And then later on in life, when people started to realize that there's a life after death and I have to take life seriously, that's when there was like this religious catalyst that occurred. And so you might see pictures of your parents that are like foreign to you completely because they look so different now than they did before. My father-in-law once had like this massive afro as a Bengali man, right? And bell-bottoms and everything in Bangladesh because of just this obsession with that culture. And now he's, mashallah, Sheikh Yasser's masjid, praying Isha, beard, into it. And one of the mistakes that we are inheriting is that we have put secular education as the penultimate goal of our existence. In that we think that a career, a success, a material contract, wealth, is what's going to bring us satisfaction. It's going to bring us happiness. And then we have kids. And we show up at the masjid, at the Sunday school, and our kids are quickly learning more about religion than we ever knew. And I see this too often for it to be an anomaly. And so one of the mistakes that I think we need to really think about and avoid is shelving religion, or shelving faith back while we prioritize secular education. I'm not saying that we don't study the secular sciences, but what I'm saying is that religion is not an exit ramp, right? Religion is not a fire escape, even though it is actually, if you think about it. That was deep, write that down. Religion is, a relationship with Allah is something that is a daily, this is why the pious people of the past had things like awrad. They had things like adhkar, that the Prophet ﷺ taught us adhkar al-sabah, adhkar al-masa, the daily remembrances. It was literally something that carried you through the day, like more important than the oxygen that we breathe. Not something that just became convenient or a way to rein our children in from dating or going to prom, right? And so this is something that we need to have a heavy shift towards at the same level, at least at the same station as secular education needs to be a refining education of faith. My mother, may Allah bless all of our mothers, my mom is an Egyptian woman. If anyone knows Egyptian women, then you know what I'm talking about. So my mom, she used to so heavily emphasize the salah. And I used to think, man, this is so extreme. I would read stories about Imam Malik's mother, and I was like, I have a mother like Imam Malik's mother, but I'm not like him. I don't know what's happening, right? And subhanAllah, I used to feel that way. And she used to do things like if I missed Fajr prayer in the masjid, not Fajr prayer in the masjid, not Fajr prayer, I'd pray Fajr in my room. She would call my work while I was sleeping and say, my son is sick, he can't come to work today. Then I would get up and try to go to work, and she goes, where are you going? I said, I'm going to work. She goes, no. You missed Fajr, you don't deserve to make money today. Egyptian mothers, right? All the Egyptians are crying right now because I triggered. And I was like, this is ghulu, like this is extremeness in deen, like what's happening, right? And then, other stories. She would say, did you pray? I said, yeah. She goes, I didn't see you. I said, you're not Allah. She goes, no, if you don't pray in front of me, it doesn't count. As a kid, right? Again, and I would actually, one day I asked her, I said, Mom, all my friends, their parents are yelling at them for like the MCAT. And you're upset with me for being late. I missed the first takbir of Fajr in the masjid and you don't talk to me for 6 hours. And she goes, You can always take a class again. You can always get your degree a year late. You can always get a job. You can always figure out. Money, it's easy to make a buck. She's like, but you missed that Fajr, it's gone forever. And till this day, I don't think I still have even understood fully the benefit of what she did to me. I'm just now starting to realize it. I think that we need to, I need to keep talking before I get emotional. I think that we need to seriously reconcile what it means to live with faith in a secular society that forces us to put it on the back burner. We can't do that. We cannot put it as second priority. We ask Allah to give us tawfiq.
So having talked about just what vision our ancestors had for us, challenges that they had, moving forward, as we look forward to what we are supposed to be doing, what is the task before our Generation Thrive, as we've named it? What do we need to do? And there's that famous mantra from the civil rights movement, to keep our eyes on the prize. What is the task at hand for us moving forward?
I would say one task as opposed. There are a lot of tasks that I think all of us could identify something differently. But I would say definitely that as Muslims in this land at this particular historic juncture, you have the responsibility of putting the pieces back together. Because once you pull the moral threads out of a society, and there are a lot of good people out there, a lot of moral people out there, but there are some serious problems that the materialistic nature of our society, the dominant Christian society, hasn't been able to tame. I mean, when you have problems such as a pharmaceutical company, Purdue Pharma, based in Stamford, Connecticut, gets a patent for a drug as powerful as OxyContin and gives free prescription for 30 days nationwide, which in effect makes everyone who got that free prescription an opioid addict, so to be less euphemistic, a heroin addict. And that culminates in 170 overdoses every day. And that number would be maybe 1,000 overdoses every day if you didn't have Narcan to bring most of the people who OD back. When you have a $716 billion so-called defense budget, which is basically spending $715 billion to murder people for the sake of business, and that passes Congress like a vote of 86-10. There's a severe moral crisis going on. When you allow children in Flint, Michigan to drink lead-infested water, knowing the impacts and the complications and the danger that lead has on childhood development, especially their mental development, and then you let a company like Nestle, half an hour drive away, suck, 200,000 gallons of water out of the aquifer every day for almost free. And then people in Flint have to pay for that water. There's some severe problems. And those problems are going to culminate in ever more drastic public crises, public health crises, public education crises. And your generation has the responsibility of putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. And that's why you can't crack. I mean, I'm not trying to overwhelm you, but if you crack and just, in other words, be like everybody else, just Humpty Dumpty sitting on his wall, and then you fall with Humpty, then all the king's horses and all the king's men and not even the Muslims can put Humpty back together again.
That's a tall order right there. Very tall order.
He's a tall man.
MashaAllah.
MashaAllah. Sheikh, bismillah.
Can you repeat the question? Because I got lost with Humpty Dumpty theology.
The question is,
my brains are fried right now.
Question is, what are the metaphoric similarities between our generation and Humpty Dumpty? That's the question, bismillah.
The question is more so, what can we do now to live up to the vision that was put before us from previous generations? Like, what is our mission now as Generation Thrive? What is the task at hand?
So again, as Imam Zayd said, there is no one task. Every one of us has a different role to play. It's not just one task that we have to do. Obviously, the ultimate task that we all have is the pleasure of Allah. How we achieve the pleasure of Allah will be different for different people. You know, people have certain talents, and they will have to utilize those talents for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, obviously, my field is Islamic education. It's teaching and preaching Islam. So one of the tasks collectively that the Ummah needs to do, that the American Ummah needs to do, is to understand its obligation to learn Islam from the sources, to understand that without knowledge you're nothing. You need to learn what the tradition allows you to do and doesn't allow you to do. Your ethics, your laws, your theology, your morality, it has to be derived from our sources. We live at a time and a place where right is wrong and wrong is right, up and down is down and down is up. We live at a time where there are no stables and everything is changing. Everything, even gender itself, which was something that was incontrovertible for entirety of human history, even that is now coming under a social construct. So it is imperative on each and every one of us, as the tides of change envelope us, it's imperative that we anchor ourselves in our tradition. We understand what our Lord wants from us. As all of these winds come, as Humpty Dumpty cracks up, we need to know how to put him back together again, to take from your metaphor. We need to have the roadmap. We need to know what it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires of us. Our primary role and goal in this world should be the pleasure of Allah. It's not the acceptance of anybody else. It's not just to be a part of society. That's not why we're here. We have a higher purpose, and that higher purpose is to walk in the prophetic footsteps, to be a role model for society. That's what we are as Muslims. We should embody the values of our tradition, to walk in the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ, so that people around us, they understand what is virtue, what is morality, what is decency, what is haya, what is theology. They see it in our actions as they could see in the Prophet ﷺ. That should be our role. In order to do that, you need to know, you need to study, you need to have some relationship with knowledge. And I have a saying, and that is that if you're not going to become an alim, don't remain a jahil. Okay? It's not wajib to become an alim. You don't have to become a scholar, but don't remain a jahil, don't remain ignorant. Learn whatever you need to. Have some relationship with your teachers, with your ulama. Know what is obligatory to know, and understand that ethics, theology, law, they come from our scripture. They're shaped from our tradition. That's where we learn our values. And as for this world, it is transient. It comes, it goes, it ebbs, it wanes, it waxes. What remains is the tradition, the legacy that our Prophet ﷺ left us with. We need to acquaint ourselves with that legacy.
All this conversation about Humpty, and we haven't talked about his heart. The Prophet ﷺ tells us very clearly that our success is dependent upon the health of our heart. Right? The Prophet ﷺ said that إِذَا صَلَحَتْ صَلَحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ, that the body itself, إِذَا صَلَحَتْ صَلَحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ, that if the whole body will be fine if the heart is taken care of. And I know that this seems a little bit reductionist, but I do think that sometimes we try to skip into the 201, 301 intermediary without first realizing that we do have to cleanse ourselves a little bit. And I think that one of the greatest lies that we bought as part of living in a secular society which doesn't put an emphasis on the sacred is that actions and words and listening and hearing and seeing things just exist in that moment of time and they don't stay with us. So I can watch a movie, I can listen to a song, and the content of that movie or song can be something that is toxic for a person's well-being, their spirituality, their morality, you name it. And as long as I turn the TV off or turn the song off and that moment is over, it doesn't stay with me. But we know that's not true. Our memory is even proof that it's not true. It stays with us longer than we realize. And one of the things that happens as a result of this pattern of behavior is that we lose the ability to see right as right and wrong as wrong. And Sheikh Yasser mentioned that up is, down and down is up. Well, one of the realities of this happening is that people have just become so distant from taking care of themselves and their health spiritually that there is no such thing as the objective right anymore with a capital R. There is no truth with a capital T. So when it comes to understanding the concepts that Imam Zayd and Sheikh Yasser are talking about, we first have to realize that we may not even be able to see what they're talking about if we first don't focus on repenting to Allah, cleansing the heart from the ailments that we have. We don't even understand the value if we are engaged in actions that are toxic, poisonous, right? Things like envy, things like lust, jealousy, backbiting. These are actions that have become ubiquitous throughout our social circles. Where now on college campuses, the FYI, Dr. Samira was mentioning to me earlier that the Family and Youth Institute talks about, premarital sex is on the rise within the Muslim community. Drug abuse is on the rise within the Muslim community. There's no doubt that the reason why individuals find no interest in seeking further knowledge of the religion or no interest in being the moral, spiritual lighthouses that this country needs is because there's no value there. And so we need to all do a deep, hard look at ourselves. Look in the mirror. يَقُولُونَ بِأَفْوَاهِهِمْ مَا لَيْسَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. No one cares what you tell people, I worked on myself today, alhamdulillah. When you get to your room, ask yourself, what is it that I struggle with? If something good happens to somebody, do I feel irritated? Maybe that's a sign that I'm sick. If I see somebody walking and I can't lower my gaze, am I okay? Can I respect that person's humanity, or have I made them into a sexual object? The Me Too movement, one of the signs that teaches us about this social, disease of sexual aggression that has just blanketed this period that we live in is that we don't have the focus of self-discipline as people anymore. We have desires and we try to gratify and satiate those desires. There's no sense of holding ourselves back. And we see this now when you see the wave of people who said, I too have been sexually assaulted. This morning we were in a session about sexual violence, and women in the audience at the end of the session, at least 5 women approached me and said, during this session I realized that I was a victim of sexual abuse. This is a sign that we as a society have to really think deeply about our micro health of our heart. Each individual, we have to go back and look at ourselves. What am I contributing to the weakness of the society that I'm in? I can't be strong for others if I can't be strong myself. I can't help others if I can't take care of myself. What water can I give if I'm dehydrated? We ask Allah to give us tawfiq. This is something very important that we have to realize from the tradition of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
I was reminded of something when Sheikh Yasser mentioned our relationship with knowledge, how important it is. There's a saying sometimes attributed, oftentimes, to Imam Ali, kun aliman or muta'alliman or mustami'an or muhibban wa la takun al-khamis fatahlik. Be a scholar. And so we had societies where it was very honorable and noble to be a scholar. And scholars were well paid. There were endowments that took care of scholars, or muta'alliman, or be a student. And so scholars had serious students gathered around them, or mustami'an. So we would literally call that an auditor, so a listener, who they're not students in the full sense of the word, but when the farmers in the village at night, they got their goats in, then after Asr, they come and sit and listen to the lessons of the scholars. And many of them will become very knowledgeable over time, and they're just farmers or goat herds or shepherds. Al-Muhibban, or one who loves those. And so those are the people, they're making money in the world, but they love the scholars and they love the students and they love the institutions where the common folk can come and benefit, so they spent their money to support them. And he said, don't be a fourth one, don't be a fifth one and therefore ruined. Don't be a person who has no relationship with religious knowledge. So you don't have to be a student, then be an auditor. If you can't do that, then, and you're just wrapped up with your dunya and making money, take a significant part of that money and support the former. So don't be a person who has no relationship with religious knowledge and therefore be ruined.
So for the next portion of this talk show, I would like to invite up 2 board members from MSA National so they can listen in, join in on the conversation, and help us move this conversation forward into what we can do in our MSAs now, what we can do at the local level, the regional level, and at the national level of how MSA National can be part of this conversation. So I'd like to invite up Brother Ahmed Mustafa and Sister Sofina Qureshi, board members from MSA National, to join us for the next part of the conversation. Please give them a round of applause. Okay. All right. Well, Sheikh Yasser Ghadi will be leaving us for this next section of the talk show, so please give him a big round of applause for joining us. Thank you so much. So before I get to the next question, just wanted to do some introductions for our 2 board members that are here joining us. So Sofina Ann Qureshi is a board chair for MSA National. She earned her undergraduate degree from Georgetown University and her MBA from Harvard Business School, and she was active in her MSA throughout college. And she currently serves as a vice president of Cookie Strategy and Transformation for the Girl Scouts of the USA, basically hopefully hooking us up with Girl Scout cookies as much as possible. And then the next board member we have is Brother Ahmed Mustafa, who is also a board member for MSA National and the founder of Muslim Youth and Family Center based in Chicago. He has spent the last 15 years dedicated to youth work, mashallah. From 2006 to 2014, he was a youth director in the Orland Park community in Illinois and currently serves on our board. So the next question that I have for our 2, for Imam Zaid and Ustad Abdurrahman, is when you were back in MSA, when you were in college, not sure if you were active in your MSA or not, but what is some advice you would give to your former self as a college student based on just who you were at that time?
Just stay connected. I think just stay connected to the MSA. I think we underrate good companionship and being around people who share your values, even if you're different. And even if there are some people who have strengths that you don't have and some who have weaknesses that you don't have, being around people who love Allah and His Messenger is a serious nourishment. I mean, you see it when you come to ISNA, right? Like people, I was talking to like some 12-year-olds upstairs and they were like, this is awesome. And I was like, why? They're like, there's so many Muslims here and everything's zabiha, right? And I was like, yeah, alhamdulillah, right? And they were like, yeah, they were just excited to be around so many people and not feel other. And I think that there's a lot to be said about just being with people that make you feel comfortable being you. And so I would tell myself, be with your brothers, be with your sisters. Doesn't mean that you have to go to lectures together. It doesn't mean you're like, hey, Friday night, Sahih Bukhari, right? Come on over. Like, it's not, even that's beautiful if you do. But it could be something as simple as, Friday night, I'm making tacos. Come to my place. Or let's order some pizza and sit and we'll pray Isha and then go home. And those were the most powerful moments in my experience with MSA, and I would recommend to everybody to try to do the same.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. What is some advice that you would give to yourself when you were back in college?
I would tell myself to slow down because, I mean, we were seriously active. And when I was involved with MSA, I was in graduate school. So we were at Rutgers University. The entire MSA was mostly graduate student driven, by and large, when I was there. And I just remember my second year, because it was 2 years of coursework, I said, because the first year I got a couple B's because we were running around. We were organizing against apartheid. And so at Rutgers, and then we were working with Princeton and Columbia and getting them to divest from South Africa. And, you know, there was so much running around. I got a couple B's, so the next year I'm gonna get all A's, I'm gonna study, I'm gonna really get into this stuff. And then we even got just more involved in all of the activism, which has its place, but there's a saying that Umar radiallahu anh is attributed to Umar, تَفَقَّهُ قَبْلَ أَن تُسَوَّدُوا. Like, study and take advantage of your years of study before you become involved in politics. That's almost a literal translation. So those years you can't get back. And you have the rest of your life to be active. And so I would tell my younger self to study more, to really take advantage of not having to go to work every day, and to spend more time in the books, more time getting a theoretical understanding of the world and how it works, more time studying my religion. I think MSAs should really work on a curriculum where you come out, 4 years of college, you come out, you memorize Quran, you've understood ulum al-hadith, ulum al-Quran, the basic Islamic sciences, which is something, you have a respectable command of Arabic because that time is spent studying. And there's room for activism, and I would never discourage a person, but there's time. If you have a normal lifetime, which is what, 72, 73 years, a little less for men, you finish college and you're 23, 22, 21, that gives you 50 good years to be an activist. So I would tell myself to study more, take advantage of those years, because you have a lot of time to do the other stuff, and not to see yourself as just indispensable. I have to do this, because as they say, the cemetery is filled with indispensable people.
Those are some words of wisdom to take to heart. Jazakallah khair. I'd like to invite both our board members to join the conversation. Do you have any thoughts on just where MSAs are right now?
Yeah, bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu salam ala rasulillah. So I've been a part of the MSA National for about a year now, or less than a year now. And so I'll be honest with you, I'm 36 years old, and if I could tell myself at 21, the advice I would get is don't be an idiot. Because, no, and I'm being honest with you. When I was at college, you're joining a board and you're dealing with something that you never dealt before, which is your nafs, your ego. And so I always talk to a lot of college kids, and I ask them, you know, what happened with you in the board if they ever drop out? They had an amazing idea. They presented to the board rejected it, and now I have to quit. And so you have a lot of these issues with these college kids dealing with their nafs for the first time, and they don't know how to handle it. And now atheism is on the rise in these college campuses. There's a lot of trials that are going their way. And let's be honest, a lot of us are young professionals maybe, possibly, right? And so when you start your job for the first time, there's a learning curve about like 6 months, right? Correct? And if you're a physician, it's like 3 to 4 years, correct? When you're an MSA student for the first time, your learning curve could be about 5 to 6 months. And then you start to get it. And guess what? 2 months later, the school year's over. And so they kind of have regret. Like, you know, I always saw something when I was younger where they butchered the head of a chicken, forgive me, and the chicken was running around. And sometimes we run around a lot, but we're not really moving forward. And the one thing that or our vision for MSA National is, how do we rectify this problem? And so our thoughts are very simple. We're looking to hire regional directors throughout the country. And so as these MSAs are being established and they're really strong, but at the same time, we need a steady figure throughout the United States to work with these MSAs, to teach them about Islamophobia, to combat atheism, how to conflict management, how to deal with your ego. Because right now, it's very, very critical for us as an organization, right? Because right now, it's a little bit tight. And I would say this, what is the blueprint for us as an MSA, right? If you look at the response of Khadija radiallahu anha when she dresses the Prophet ﷺ for the first time, when he gets the wahi, she says the following, Allah will never forsake you. You're good to your relatives. You're truthful to your words. You help the people in need. You support the weak. You're good to your guests. And if anyone calls for you, you're there. You help the distressed. Wallahi, that is the blueprint. That is the blueprint for every MSA throughout the country to follow. And as Islamophobia was rising in Mecca, and Abu Bakr wanted to make hijrah to Abyssinia, a non-Muslim, Ibn Daghina, goes to him and says the exact same words that Khadija said to the Prophet ﷺ. And right now, Islamophobia and everything that's happening along the way, it's tight now. And right now, that discomfort is actually not a bad thing. It's making us woke, right? That's a new term that people are using now. It's making us woke. We as an organization are waking up, and our goal is to hire regional directors throughout the country to assist these MSAs to strive forward as an organization. So I'll stop talking. Jazakallah khair.
So, Safina, the question for you is, what is the vision and what are the goals for MSA National, given that we talked about the regional coordinator, we've talked about what our ancestors in the past have wanted for us. Now, how is MSA National moving that forward?
Sure, I'm happy to answer that. So the first thing I will say is that in some ways the vision hasn't necessarily changed in the sense that we know the challenges that students face when they go to university are in some ways very similar to the challenges that they faced over time, right? So there's a sense that, university is often a really pivotal period, right? It's a moment of self-discovery, it's a journey, it's a place where you can either pivot towards your faith or in some ways pivot away from it, right? So how can your MSc be a place where you can find your faith and find yourself, right? And so the challenges are the same, but we realize that the ways that we interact with students and the ways that we support students do need to change in a way that makes sense. So one of the things that we're doing is a regional director model. We feel like a more decentralized, more regional way of serving students is actually a better way to stay close to students and to support them in the ways that they need, right? The other piece that we've really been thinking about is, one of the biggest challenges that MSAs have always faced is one of funding. So college students are poor. It's the reason why lunch was free today for those who came to our leadership session. We get it, you're poor. One of the things that we've heard from many of our donors, though, is that they want the opportunity to support students locally, but they don't really know how to do that. And so technology has advanced such that we can do match granting. So you can donate to MSA National, and we will do match grants in partnership with LaunchGood. It's a 3-to-1 match, right? So students raise, for every $3 they raise, we match $1, and they do all kinds of amazing things. They, did Umrah trips. They raised money for folks in Darfur, for folks in Yemen. They did arts projects. They did community service projects. It's an amazing way for you to be able to have the money that you donate match students and match their needs across the country. And so we were really fortunate. It was all over the US, all over Canada. So it's the other piece that we're doing. Again, it's a great way of connecting you with what students are doing locally and providing them with the funds to do amazing things in their local community.
Thank you. So these are big projects and visions that we've outlined for what we want the organization to do nationally in the US and Canada, but what is the game plan to actually set this in motion?
I guess I'll take that one. Can everyone pull this out?
It's on your chair.
It was on your chair. It's a pamphlet. So it might be a little bit confusing, but I'll clarify it. We're not looking for you to donate a cup of coffee to us, literally. And so the concept is very simple. We want everyone to be involved in this project. So, subhanAllah, I needed a caffeine kick about an hour ago, and so I went to the Starbucks line, and it's packed. And so one thing that we do as humans is we're very habitual people, and if you drink coffee, you tend to drink coffee every day. And sometimes we buy coffee without even thinking about it. And so the average cost of a cup of coffee is $2.70. I think it's double here at this hotel, but it's $2.70. What we're looking for, it's very simple. There's for one thing, there's the 5 costs a cup of coffee. I'm not even sure if I said that correctly, which makes around $13.50. So what we're looking for as an organization is, if you buy a cup of coffee, you don't think twice about it, then inshallah you can make a donation on behalf of our organization so we can have these projects of hiring a regional director and working with Launch Good to support local MSAs throughout the country. And so, it's actually a really beautiful hadith. The Prophet ﷺ says that the most beloved actions and deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the most consistent. And so what we're just looking for today, I think everyone here can do this, is donate $13.50 a month to the MSA National Organization. I don't think that's a tall order. And I know it's actually interesting because typical fundraisers or soft pitches, they always tend to go with the high amounts, right? And who do they quote after? They'll compare those high amounts to who? Abu Bakr, Uthman, radiallahu anhum, right? And that's great, but a lot of us at times can't donate all our wealth or half our wealth. And so we feel kind of guilty that we're unable to reach those particular companions. So we're starting at the actual lowest amount and saying, hey, can you guys at least donate the cost of 5 cups of coffee a month to MSA National, which is $13.50. That's what we're looking for. And this is even for any college student, even high school student, I believe can do it. Because the reason why I believe they can do it is because I just went to the Starbucks line and saw half the kids there. So we can do it as an organization and as a population that is here right now. In addition to that, if you're a young professional, can you donate 10 cups of coffee to MSA National, which is $27 a month? And if you could do 20 cups and 30 cups, then please do it, because we really need that steady income coming into our organization every month to support our projects. I'm not sure if Safina would like to add.
Yeah. To be clear, if you are also interested in a large donation, we're absolutely thrilled to take that too. We'll never say no. But we have students walking around. They have boxes. There are sheets on your chairs. We're also happy to talk about larger donations if you are interested. But we thought this was just a way for you all to be able to support us in a consistent way, but a way that just raises the habit of donation. One of the things that we know when you're young is starting those habits of being a donor are just so important, because if you don't have the money when you're young, honestly, if it doesn't become a habit, you'll never set aside the money, and you'll never have the money as you get older, right? And so it's just such an important way to participate and to be part of supporting MSA National and supporting MSAs across the country.
Thank you for that. So I wanted to actually share just an example of just what we're talking about when it comes to what this money will be going to. As the student director for MSA National, earlier today, I led a strategy session for MSA board members from across the nation. And the major points that they kept referring to as weaknesses or things that they need to work on included points of inclusivity in the MSA. How do we make sure that our MSAs are more inclusive to everybody? How do we grow our MSA from a small MSA to a large one? How do we make sure that we get more funding to be able to do the programming that we want to do? And so many other issues that we as MSA National want to help Muslim students with, and do it at a greater capacity with staff members, with more funding, like Launch Good campaign that we have that tries to match the funding. That if an MSA raises $500, let's match that so they get double that amount to do the good work that they want to do. Or how do we get more staff on the ground for MSAs to help them? Like if an MSA in California is having trouble with something, how can you get a staff member to provide one-on-one consulting for them to be able to do that type of work? So just wanted to kind of give an example of how this vision will play out in action. And I think with that, I want to ask our two speakers, Imam Zaid and Ustad Abdurrahman, like, do you have any final remarks just on anything we've talked about today when it comes to the questions we asked earlier, or just MSA, anything at all? We'd love to hear from you before we conclude this session.
Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahim. I would, first of all, thank everyone for their patience. It's been a long weekend, and there's been a lot of very interesting and informative, beneficial sessions. So I know a lot of the people here, and definitely everyone on the stage has been running around from here to there. So I would like to commend everyone, the attendees, on their attentiveness and their patience, and encourage everyone to support financially. Students, as was mentioned, are practicing for their PhD to become poor, hungry doctors, as opposed to MDs, the money doctors. So I know you're poor and hungry as a student, but everyone has a little bit of money. Everyone can forego a cup of coffee. Everyone can forego a slice or two of pizza and pool that money to donate to the MSA. So whatever you might be able to do, great or small, today, going forward, a pledge, I would encourage everyone to do that, because the people who are working against Islam and the Muslims are spending a whole lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions. And so to push back, to defend ourselves against that tsunami, to build a seawall, it's going to take resources. It's not going to take as much as they're spending, but it's going to take resources. Not as much, because what you spend to defend and to encourage people and to clarify the truth about the religion is blessed, and it's a hasana. والحسنات بعشر أمثالها إلى 700 ضعف إلى أضعاف كثيرة. The good deed, that $1 is immediately will do the work of 10, or 700, or 7,000, 7 million. أضعاف كثيرة. I've seen it in my life. I've seen it personally in different projects. So please help the MSA, and that small amount you might be able to spend. Never underestimate the power of it, or the work that it might do, or the seed money, literally, that might plant a tree, and that tree bears fruit, and that fruit has many seeds in it. So spend, study, take advantage, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, read your Quran, study the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hold on to those cultural markers that identify you as a Muslim. People say it doesn't matter what you wear, how you dress, it's what's in your heart. But you can't walk around. Remember Michael Jackson, the Thriller jacket and the white sequin glove? You can't walk around in a Michael Jackson Thriller jacket that you consciously put on and a white sequin glove and say, that doesn't affect my heart. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah.
That was a literal mic drop, mashallah. Imam Zayd just gave the answer that we all need to hear, and that is that you are too valuable to give yourself to anything besides Allah. The only thing worthy of what you have is the one who created you and his messenger. Don't ever forget that. Be successful in every endeavor in life, but be most successful in your relationship with Allah. And you'll see that Allah's mercy will rain upon you, and you will not be able to avoid the blessings that He will send. We ask Allah to give us tawfiq, inshaAllah. Jazakumullah khairan.
All right, Jazakumullah khairan to our speakers for tonight's event. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom that you shared with all of us here.
The 55th Annual ISNA Convention. In God we trust.